it's a huge boon to be a people's person in journalism.
I just want to add one thing that you mentioned Virat Kohli twice or thrice now, and there are going to be people who are going to say that you're very pro Virat Kohli, you have an agenda for him, and you don't like Rohit Sharma. That these things that you know
Hey,
these
I watched a lot more Rohit Sharma in my early days of journalism than Virat Kohli. I'm a Bombay guy, yeah. And
what
Rohit
I'm
Sharma,
what,
yeah, and
I completely get it. What I'm trying to say is that these are the times that we sometimes live in. That I
I
don't know.
understand.
There's this tweet by Master Arshad, and I loved it, and I also asked him about it. He said that on social media, if you say you like coffee, the question is, oh, you hate tea. Why don't you said something about tea? So that is where I was coming from. I'm sure that you
Yeah,
followed.
I don't know. I totally agree with you. Social media, you can never win in social media or on social media.
So, like you mentioned about, being a people's person and, covering stories. Now, of course, when you do that, there's also a part of you which gets invested. So my next question comes from the place where that when you've worked so much on a story, say like a Patrick Patterson story, uh, apart from, it affecting you from professional point of view where now more people know about your work, how does such stories which are also dark in some way, because we sort of never imagine someone being at the heights of their power in their profession, being ending up in the dark in this way that they don't even remember themselves. How does these stories affect you personally? I'm sure there are some thoughts which also come to your mind, like, what if this happens to me, or I hope it doesn't happen to me, or I hope it doesn't happen to someone else. So how, I'm sure, and we are just scratching the surface with this Patrick Patterson story, because this is just one story that you've been able to bring it to us. And like you said before, that there are several other journalists who work on more real issues, where they are working on the issues of the society, where there are much darker
Exactly.
stories. So how difficult or easy can it be to deal with coming across such stories? And again, I am being very curious about it, because like you said, you need to be curious. I need to know how does someone work with it, because today's time specifically are such where you see a lot of things which sort of break your spirit, or make you question a lot of things, like if it's even worthwhile. And this made me thinking that people who do this day in and day out, how do they get over the anxiety that might come along with it?
No, no, it's very humbling. I mean, when you meet like a Patrick Patterson or like so many others, like I've met in my career, like around the world, as like, some who I have not even been able to write about because I just didn't think it was right. Because uh, whoever you're writing about, whatever you're writing about, you still need to respect that subject, right? Like, you have to write it in a way as a journalist, right? I mean, we are not opinion makers, we are journalists. So even when you're reporting a villainous character, you still need to give the other side of the story, because that's my job. I'm a reporter, right? Like, I'm reporting, so I need to do that fact check and also give the other side of the story. Like, I can't just slam someone, I can't just glorify someone. That's not my job. Like, I come across a lot of pieces by newer journalists who just like write these glory pieces on like whoever, whatever cricketer. But that's not reporting, that's not journalism, that's writing. But that's not our job. Our job, we are, I mean, at the very basic level, we are chroniclers, right? We are chroniclers of the world in many ways. Like, we chronicle cricket, others, like you said, chronicle more important things in life. But it is very humbling. You learn a lot about yourself as well when you interact with these kind of people, about like, how like, you, of course, like you said, you think about it like, wow, like, I've seen it in my personal life. People at the top of their game completely lose everything. People very close to me, that's happened to. So I learned a lot from that. So meeting Patrick Patterson, it helped me that I had already experienced it in my personal life, that when I met him, I could relate with it. I was like, yeah, it can happen to anyone. So it's something you just have to accept. And I think you put it correctly. Uh, you have to, how do I put it, like, you have to make yourself, you have to invest yourself into that story, like
And
especially
then
if it's a long.
detach as well after a point
And
of
then
time.
immediately detach. Like, yeah, I mean, you invest and then you detach. There are some stories like with Patrick Patterson, he became my life he became a part of my life. Like, I have my family and he's not part of my family, but he's part of my life. But that was just a very extraordinary, extreme circumstance story. There are many others, like, where who you write about, whose circumstance you write about. And then you don't move on, but you kind of step back, right? Like, you let that story play out, and hope that if it's a case where it's someone in distress, then you hope that help reaches them. If it's about someone, story who, it's like a story of glory, then you don't bask in their glory, right? You still walk away, and then you go back to, and that's why it goes back to what I said. You have to accept your own reality. A story is still a story. It's not your story. It doesn't make it your story, right? You're still writing someone else's story. So that's where that respect is very important. You can't influence that story based on how you think about that subject, or like, what you, like when Nihal Koshi wrote about, uh, I'm forgetting the athlete's name, who came out and spoke about homosexuality for the first time last year, about 2 years ago, was it? Like, imagine the amount of respect he has to give that person, wherein, like, he has to leave any prejudice if he has about that person out, and at the same time write it in a respectful fashion, or with so much respect that the reader also is never in a position where he or she can judge the subject. And I think that for me, that was the story of 2019. Nihal Koshi is my ex-colleague and a good friend of mine with the Indian Express. And it's yeah, I mean, it's every story is a journey in many ways. Like, even a basic interview, every day's play of cricket is almost like a journey, right? You're living it. That's why you don't realize how tired you get by the, at least I get very tired. I also talk so much, but at the end of the day, when I hit the bed, I'm knackered, I'm gone, I'm like, I have no energy left, because you're observing so many things, right? Like, you are involved, like, you're not on the field, but you technically are. I mean, that's the job of a journalist when you're in the press box. Like, it's not just about, no offense to who those who want to, who do, like, who just enjoy the perks of the press box. But at least for me, it's about, like, involving myself with every ball. Like, one thing I always do, is, not a trade secret really. Before every ball, I make it a point. It's just out of habit. I notice everyone on the field once. Like, that when the bowler is at the top of the mark, when the bowler is backing walking back, I try to just take a notice of every fielder, the two batsmen, the two umpires, before every ball. It just kind of gives me a mental image of who's where. So that's the amount of investment I put into, like, while watching a game. That's just my style of journalism. There's no right or wrong about it, or good or bad about it. So because of that, by the end of the day, I'm like, like, bus ho gaya, yaar. And similarly, there are stories like, yeah, I mean, I've seen journalists pursue stories for 3 months on tour, and them, like, really collapse when they realize that the person's not going to give them an interview, or, like, the story that they were seeking, they're not getting. So it can be a tiresome subject, but all those experiences are like learning experiences. You learn different things from different stories. I mean, either people stories like a Patrick Patterson one, or like, about your own resilience, or about your own patience or lack thereof, right? Like, you learn a lot when you pursue stories.
Makes sense. Like, what you mentioned about observing every fielder before every ball, I think it becomes very important because, like I said before, for a big game, you have ways of watching the game. So as long as you'll only like to read something which you think you've not been able to gather from watching the game, and these are the minute details which will make you read the subject or read a particular author. I particularly, I'll make a confession. I particularly look forward to Sid Monga's articles. And this is one of the reasons, and I found a similar pattern in your pieces as well, and which is why I now move to talk about this Border Gavaskar Trophy. Uh, I wouldn't really say, because you only mentioned that it's not probably the best or the biggest amount of work that you've done, and you also don't want to categorize it like that. So hence, I won't go into it. I'd just like to ask from a a cricket fan perspective, because from whatever cricket I have seen in the last 16, 17 years, I've probably seen it for the very first time with an Indian team, that there have been so many debutants, five debutants, and for all practical purposes, you could say that even Shardul Thakur was also a debutant. So, what do you, you'd like to say was the body language and the mindset of these people who were playing for the first time? Because someone like a Washington Sundar hadn't even played a first class game in 3 years. Shubman Gill himself very young. Shardul Thakur played his first test match, got injured after 10 deliveries. T. Natarajan traveled as a net bowler and then ended up making a debut. And then Navdeep Saini as well, although he got injured in the second test which he played. So what I want to know from you was, how was, I'm sure you've covered different debutants as well before with different Indian teams and other teams. How was this group of, especially the young players, different from any other group of young players? Because to do what they did is something which is crazy, for all practical purposes.
Yeah, and before I start, I have to say, because you brought him up, yeah, Sid Monga and I have shared a lot of rooms and uh, at times beds together, because some of the places we have been able to afford have been very small, and like, yeah, over the years. So he's not only a very dear friend of mine, but like, yeah, we've been on crazy journeys around the world, like for uh, everywhere, like, yeah, and we have some great experience, and like, yeah, I think I've always held that he is the most extraordinary cricket writer in India currently. And because we're both wrestling fans, and purely because of that, I'm not passing a judgment on any past or present cricket writer. I always say he's the best cricket writer now, then, forever. And that's because that's the WWE slogan, if you are a wrestling fan. But yeah, I mean, coming to the series itself, I think it's very simple. I think I wrote about it at some point. I said it's just a fear of failure, and I give a lot of credit to Ravi Shastri and the team management. You could see was just taken away. It's almost like they were stripped of this fear of failure. And yeah, if you watched R. Ashwin's videos on YouTube, he speaks about it a lot without really saying fear of failure. Like, they were just given the freedom to go out and just be themselves. I will not say express themselves because that's the cliche alongside intent, but just be themselves. And I think it came a lot from uh, when the Indian team landed here, in all the circumstances, bubbles, and all that controversy around that. I don't think they really looked at this with Virat Kohli leaving after the first test and all that youngish bowling attack. I don't know how much they thought of this being their best chance to repeat their performance from 2018, where they had like a full strength team, more or less. I mean, their openers towards the end got up. I mean, were up and down. Vijay lost his form, and Agarwal and Vihari opened. But I think more or less they just speaking to a lot of them as well. They came here and they said, we'll give it our best shot. This is like a full strength Australian team who last summer just crushed everyone. Like, they crushed Pakistan and New Zealand. They have the best. The bowling attack is performing as a unit. Stark has regained his mojo in many ways. So I think they just got into it saying, let's see how it goes. And then 36 all out happened. And I think that changed everything. So after 36 for 9 declared, or whatever people want to say, so 36, when the Adelaide debacle happened, two things happened. A, it meant that I got to cover the whole tour, because if that hadn't happened, I would have been stuck in Adelaide, because I'd been in Sydney covering the one-day leg, and this whole and Melbourne had shut its borders to anyone who was in Sydney. So my tour would have ended if that test match had gone for one more day. So I'm very happy that 36 all out happened, because it allowed me to cover the rest of the tour. But I think it kind of uh, made it a nothing to lose for series for the Indian players, whoever played. I mean, not just the senior members of the team, but then whoever came in. Like, just look at each test match independently. It's difficult to do that when you're talking about a series. But if you look at it independently, they go to Melbourne, Boxing Day, lose the toss. The pitch looked really good to bat on. The sun was out, and they turn around the first day's play. I think they won the series on day one at the MC on Boxing Day. Like, when everything was going Australia's way, were on top of the world, having destroyed India in some ways in Adelaide, and like, they have the best of the conditions, having won the toss, and they got off to a decent start as well. But once they won that day, you look at Rahane making 100. But if you think about it, they were they had nothing to lose at that point, right? Then they go to Sydney amidst all the drama of like, Sydney, we don't like the bubble here. I mean, the biosecure bubble, we should be allowed to go out. Not. I also wrote a lot of pieces on that, so I contributed to the drama, the melee in some ways. But people getting injured on the last day. They had Australia at some levels dominated that test, right? When, if you remember, when the whole and the Mohammad Siraj thing happens, like the whole him being allegedly racially abused, and again they reached a point of like, we have nothing to lose in this test match, right? Like, anyway, we don't have the fear of failure has been gone thanks to the team management, but we have nothing to lose. They will just do what we can do. And then you had Ashwin and Vihari, like, wounded and walking, barely walking and wounded, somehow saved the day. Like, there was nothing to lose. Like, India should have lost that test match right after Rishabh Pant gets out. And Rishabh Pant's hand is nearly broken, and he comes back and makes runs on that day. There's some talk of, could India possibly win this? Maybe they can. But then Pujara gets out to Josh Hazelwood. They had nothing to lose. Like, they just had to block, and they blocked. Australia panicked and India walked. Then they go to Brisbane, like speak of, like, if anyone writes a book on nothing to lose, that playing 11 should be on the cover, right? Like, you look at that bowling attack you had Siraj playing his third test, you had Saini playing his second test. Not no, Saini was injured as well. Sorry, you had Siraj
But
playing his
Sani played that test
Saini
match.
played. No, I'm so
Played. He
confused.
got injured on the first day.
Saini, yeah, they played Saini playing second. Of course. Saini got injured in the second test. Shardul Thakur playing, like you said, practically his first test. Because I remember covering his first test where he bowled 11 balls. And Natarajan on debut, Sundar on debut. How can you play with that kind of a bowling attack? Like, you had nothing, absolutely nothing to lose. And again, Australia should have made 450 and battered India out of the game, but they did not. They started off really well, if you remember. So it was just, it was one of those incredible scripts where a team had nothing to lose in every match they played, which added to the atmosphere that the team management had created for them with Rahane as captain and Virat Kohli as captain before that. Um, they just It allowed them to just be themselves, like, play with that element of freedom and that partnership between Shardul Thakur and Washington. On the way India batted on that last day in the run chase, uh, they were just examples of that. I mean, they just embodied the sense of freedom that this Indian team had, and for me, that's why India won that series.
You know, I still believe that even if probably India would have been playing their best 11, I don't think there was a possibility that India would have still won at Gabba, because chasing 300 on the fifth day, it doesn't happen. Even it doesn't happen with Indian teams even when they're doing it at home. To do it in Gabba. So for I'm sort of a younger generation fan because I followed after 2003 2004, so haven't really watched the Kolkata 2001 Test match or the NatWest Trophy of 2002. So for me, it
Right.
was the whole series was actually an amalgamation of both the games, because you had the youngsters coming up doing impossible things and having that partnership. So it will obviously remain a special memory, and I had to ask you about that. And now I'd probably like to ask you one last thing, because that is what people keep lining up with you to ask about, and that is MS Dhoni. And I'm not really particularly going to ask you rather about what how is MS Dhoni as a person, and etc etc, because the book is you've written 200 pages on that, so it would be unfair for me to ask you about that. And even despite writing that book, I know you said that he still remains an enigma to even someone like you. So what I'd like to ask you is something very different. I want to ask you about is when it comes to Amazon is the impact that he's had on the city of Ranchi and the state of Jharkhand. How much, if probably, again, this is something which is very difficult to answer, but still I'd like to get some words from you on the impact that he's had on that city, and probably not only that state, but that region of, you could say that northeastern or that whole belt of Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh,
Hmm.
Bihar, etc. What's been his impact? Because I'm sure you would have covered those areas as well in terms of when you were writing that book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think his friend Simant Lohani, or Chittu as he's called,
Chittu,
summed
yeah.
it up. He said Ranchi. पागल खाने के लिए माना जाता था, अभी धोनी के लिए माना जाता है, like, and he said that, I put it in the book. And very recently I met, I'd gone for a friend's wedding in Sydney, and his fiance's father originally comes from Ranchi, and so he was very happy to see me. I mean, I didn't know him at all before that, because I was introduced as the guy who wrote on Dhoni, and more importantly, who went to Ranchi to work on that book. So I told him this line, and he said, absolutely right. Like, it was known for that, the Pagal Khana. It was an industrial town. It was known for whatever, the steelworks or whatever, that belt, not just Ranchi. And I didn't know how big he was in Ranchi, what he meant to Ranchi, till I went there. I read pieces, like, people who had covered cricket in Ranchi. I'd never been to Ranchi before I worked on the book. The way it happened was, I mean, to cut this long story short, I told him I'm writing this book, and he said, cool. And I said, can you please give me access to, I know you're not going to talk to me, at least someone who will talk. Like, he said, like, yeah, I can count on my fingers people who really know me well. And like, and then eventually one of them, Chittu, got in touch with me. I flew to Ranchi. He'd like booked a hotel room for me and all that. Um, and I realized within the first half an hour of being there that just because I'm being introduced as someone who's writing on Dhoni, they treated me as some celebrity. Like, I was being picked up in fancy cars and taken here and there. Every time I went, like, wherever I went, like to the stadium, for example, like they already had like a setup for me in a way. Like, they had already, like, chai was arranged, and like I was, as one thing cricket journalists will tell you, like we have more experiences of being chased away from hotel lobbies than being invited into one or welcomed into one anyway. So, or being chased away from places, forget about hotel lobbies. So to be welcomed like that, and being like, I remember one guy telling me, आप हमारे माही पे लिख रहे हैं किताब, तो आप भी सुस्टार बनोगे, like जिसका भी हाथ, just like. And that's when I was convinced to call it the Dhoni touch. He said that one of them said, उसका हाथ जिस पे भी लगता है वो whatever, like, my Hindi is not the best, but उसका पूरा चमक जाता है life, or something like that. So I was like, wow, this guy is big, like, bigger than just the son of the soil and all that. Like, this guy really represents this city. And you can see, like, the city has got so much more attention since I liked Ranchi. Like, it had that very uh, like, very homely feel to it, in like almost a throwback to the times. Maybe like it felt like a throwback to the 90s for me when I went there in 2017. Just the way it was. But he's really put that city on the map in many ways. You land on the airport, and you immediately know, though the airport is not named after him yet, but you just know that you're in Dhoni city, not that you're in Ranchi. And every one there has a story. I can relate it with Adelaide, for example. Like, everyone here, even though Bradman's not originally from here, he moved here in the 1930s, and he lived actually down the road. Like, where I'm pointing, it's just like a 7-minute walk from where I live. So he lived in that house and died in that house in 2001. So if you speak to people in Adelaide or in some parts of Sydney, everybody has a Bradman story. It was like that with Dhoni. Wherever you went, they were like, यहाँ पे चाय पीता था, वहाँ पे पाव खाता था, यहाँ पे ये करता था, वहाँ पे, like, like, it's like a Dhoni tourist site, like, and everything is a tourist site. So I don't know if someone does it already. Someone in Jharkhand, if they're listening to this, should start the Dhoni tours. Like, you can easily do it. It can be like a whole day thing. There are just so many places there. So I think he's not just put Ranchi on the map, but he's made it much more relevant than it ever was in its history.
Makes sense. I think that also, sort of in a way keeps telling us and, affirming us of the idea that sport does play a huge part in terms of shaping society, whether it may do directly, indirectly, or through, some kind of stands or statements that, sports persons do, but it does. I think it's quite unfair to ever say that sport is not related to society, or it should always be separate, because you just can't do it. Like you said earlier, it even though, the people who might play it become superstars, at the end of the day they are still humans. They still have their own stories, and that is how it affects people. one last thing, and
And just before on that, like, I think the one thing Dhoni has done, which has given Ranchi even more credence as a place, I think the fact that what happens to most celebrities in India when they don't come from the bigger cities, they all move to the bigger cities, right? To either move to Bombay or to Delhi or to in Chennai or these big cities. The fact that he's chosen to stick to Ranchi, he's built a much bigger house than the one that he grew up in and the one that he used to live in. But the fact that he still calls Ranchi home just tells you that if MS Dhoni can think that after all the success, all the fame, that he still thinks Ranchi should be my home and my only home, my real home. It almost tells you everything you need to know about that city.
interesting. Now, one last question, and this comes from a very personal place, because I've followed someone who you've now been working with quite frequently. I've really liked Melinda Farrell's work, whether it be her writing or doing those videos. Earlier they used to be polite inquiries on Quick Info, and now she does the good, bad, and ridiculous. How's the equation between the two of you? Because as a viewer, it comes as which is something very natural and just about two friends having fun together and discussing the sport that they enjoy. Uh, how really is it working with her?
Oh, no, it is two friends just having a chat, having a conversation. I mean, we are similar people, but in many ways very different. Like Mel is just honestly, and I don't say this about too many people. She's just like the nicest person you can meet, like a genuinely nice person. I mean, she's one of those people. She's scarily nice, like, to the extent I get scared of um, how how she can see the positive in everything and everyone in the world. Right? You'll never rarely hear her talk, say a one bad word about anyone else, like whether they're there or they're not there. And she just has this positive energy and positive vibe about her wherever she goes, whichever room she enters. And I like to believe I'm a pretty positive person as well. I'm the eternal optimist. Like I always think that I live for 150 years. Yeah, but I know I can't. But it's just that ever since we met each other in 2014, we weren't this close as we are now, but we were like we just bonded, like we just randomly bonded. The first thing I was saying this on Good Bad Ridiculous, yes, day before, is she used to have a show called Mel from the Ground. This is for she was when she was still working for Crick Info, and it's in the early years of Crick Info. And I toured Australia in 2014, and I'm a heavy metal guy. I think one of the questions I saw on Twitter was, which is the greatest heavy metal album? It's of course Rust in Peace by Megadeth. But I just randomly started singing. I'm just Mel from the Ground. It's some Jennifer Lopez song that I'd heard in a mall or something. Nothing wrong with listening to Jennifer Lopez, but I just really haven't really heard too much of it. In fact, last night I saw a long documentary with my wife on Katy Perry, and I did not know anything about Katy Perry, and now I'm a fan, like knowing her story. But anyway, similar people's person, like every person has a story, real story. Katy Perry, MS Dhoni, the same. But yeah, so that's how our relationship began. I used to I'm very bad with my dance, but I used to do something like that and sing "I'm Just Mel from the Ground," and she started singing it, and that's how we became friends. Sid Monga played a big role because she was Sid Monga's colleague, and Sid Monga and I were all like joined at the hip during that tour. In fact, so Mel being Mel shot this video of the whole tour. It was a long tour. It was a 2-month tour. This is the Philip Hughes, when Philip Hughes passed away, that tour, followed by that, there was a tri series,
And
and then
then the
both of
World
us
Cup.
left. Then the World Cup. So we didn't stay for the World Cup, Monga and I. But so it was called The Summer of Love between Bharat and Sid. And so Mel recorded this video, and we had like we didn't know that. So she kept recording us at different points, added some music. She had others also join in, like other journalists like Pete Lawler and a lot of Indian journalists were on the Turan and Vasu and everyone. And she compiled that video. I we knew we were in love with each other, Monga and I, but we didn't know other people knew about it then. We didn't know it was public yet. So that was the first tour, and then over time we just like would bump into each other, and the chemistry is very real. Like it's our friendship is very genuine that way, in the sense Like I said, those are the similar. That's where we're similar in terms of being positive and being like, boisterous. Like she's much more boisterous than I am. I'm just talkative. She's just like, she'll jump around, she'll hug people. She'll just, if Mel walks into a room, you'll hear her before you see her. Mel's coming. But with me, yeah, I'm not that kind of person. I would like to believe I'm a nice person, but I don't think anybody can be as nice as Mel. But the whole good, bad, ridiculous thing started at the start of this summer, where she was in between jobs, and she was like, "Oh, what do you think I should do?" I said, "You're Mel Farrell. Like, where's your YouTube channel?" She said, "Yeah, it's there, but I don't know." I said, "Do stuff, see how it grows." And then Gav Joshi and I, who I shared the caravan with, we gave her this idea, and it just took off. And initially, she tried doing it with a lot of people. So I used to be a guest star, and she did it with Adam Gilchrist, and she claims that's what put her on the map. But of course, I believe it's me. And then, of course, the Adam Gilchrist thing went viral. Like, she got a lot of subscribers. And then I just became a regular guest, and we both realized organically that, look, we just seem to have this chemistry on air that a lot of people think we do. Uh, I'll be the co-host, and we should do it together. And that's how it began. And yeah, I mean, I had the pleasure of going and visiting a family in Orange, because I was stuck in New South Wales after the series ended, so I couldn't come back home. So they asked me to drive around rural New South Wales for like 2 weeks. So started with going to Mel's beautiful hometown of Orange. I met her mother, met her niece. It was a good time. And yeah, I mean, we've just become really good friends. Like, yeah, I mean, even though, like I said, apart from the positivity, we don't share anything in common. But yeah, cricket, and she is a proper cricket nut. Like, she watches a lot of cricket, to the extent, like, when we prepare for our shows, I have to catch up. I'm a very reluctant cricket watcher. If I don't have to watch cricket to write on it, or because I'm working on it, I don't watch cricket. I'll watch wrestling, or I'll watch something else, like, anything but cricket. But she's just like on the job. Like, there's a lot we can learn from her enthusiasm for her job, enthusiasm for life, and also that dedication. I mean, she was a one person army for many years, right? When she was working for Crick Info, she used to carry all that heavy equipment and shoot the video, edit the video, produce the video. So yeah, and yeah, one of the most liked characters in cricket around the world, and for good reason.
But just one thing to ask for, one thing that I have to ask after this. So who has better hair? Is there ever a fight between the two of you? Who has better hair, whether it's Melinda or yours?
I think she will be the first to accept that it is me, and I have that issue at my own house as well. Like, there are days when I, like, walk out of the shower when it's hair wash day, and my wife will be standing out there like just gritting her teeth. She'll be like, "How can your hair look so straight just when you washed it? And look at my hair!" And like, so it's a she always threatens me with a scissor, my wife. So it's a long running joke between us. Not a joke. I think joke for me, not for my wife. It's serious. That's why, if you read my book, like, the dedication page, I just dedicated it to Isha, saying for letting me keeping my hair longer than hers, which we used to have she used to have a rule in the house that my hair could not grow longer than hers. And after a point, she just gave up. So it's the same with Isha, but with Mel as well. Like, she's got the blonde hair that some might prefer, but come on, how can you beat this?
Especially when you've maintained it for 20 years now. Well, it's been a delight having this chat, and there's of course a lot more that we can discuss with you, Bharat. But I think we've already gone over the time limit, and we've already had too much for people to consume in one go. Probably we'll have you back again sometime in the future. Till then, I'd really like to thank you for taking out the time and doing this chat, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. I had a blast. And yeah, going back to your intro, just be the best person you can be, and everyone will be happy, and it'll be a happy world.
Well, you've heard it from the man. And on this note, I'd like to end the show. Just like to say that if you like this video, please share it with your friends and do subscribe to the YouTube channel for much more content of people who've been behind the scenes, people not only just cricket, but people who've been behind the scenes in the field of sport, who bring the story of various sports to you. Because although we do get to know about the story and get inspired from the sports person itself, there's a lot more which does not meet the eye than we can imagine. For all that, I'd just like to say that please subscribe to this channel and keep watching Gupshup with Gill. Thank you to all of you for watching this show, and we hope you're back again.